Welcome to the Happy Doc, the voice of fulfilled physicians. This show is about bringing inspirational, creative, successful, and happy health professionals to you. Get ready to learn how you can be a happy doctor too. Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Taylor Brana, and this is another episode of the Happy Doc. Today, I'm with a very special guest and friend, Jay Doran from Culture Matters. I'm really excited to have you, Jay. How are you doing?
Better than most.
Better than most.
That's my answer.
You know, I want to know what the most are like then.
Not better than me. Better than most of the most.
Better than most of the most.
Yeah.
So,
feeling pretty good.
Amazing.
A little jet lagged.
So where did you travel from?
Los Angeles. Sounds more fun than it was.
You're busy working?
So that's it. Working.
No
nightclubs. Nothing.
No nightclubs.
Different culture.
So, okay. Before we even talk about culture,
get over there.
Before we even go to that direction, so Culture Matters. People that are going to listen to this are probably not familiar with your brand and what you guys do.
Yeah.
So, first things first, what got you so excited about culture?
Wow. So every day from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, I had a business, a brick and mortar, where we started with just a vision, 2-3 guys, a couple sleeping bags, and this idea of a very successful business, right? Mm-hmm. Fast forward 6 months, we had these team meetings where over 25 employees would show up from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, not paid to be there at that time, but wanting to be there to talk about our values, to talk about what we stood for, and to learn something. We trained on the hard and the soft skills necessary for them to grow that would better the experience of that business. I had read a book that inspired me to get really clear on the values of our organization, and it completely changed my life, because in those meetings from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, I found something that was more important than me, and that was sharing something inspiring and something tacit, like knowledge that people would better themselves in. So I said it one night, I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking, how do I make this meeting that's occurring in our business where we're seeing more results, obviously, right? More revenue, better customer experience. Employees love what they're doing more than anything else is what they're telling me. Like, how do I do this every day? How would I teach this? And that's when the journey began. About I don't even know how many years ago that was. Was that 4 years ago almost or something like that?
Sure.
So that's how it all started. It started in these team meetings where people came together to learn, to grow, to listen, to share, and develop as humans.
That's amazing. I love it. So even though that was a small part of your day, you said like an hour of your day.
Yeah, it was like an hour.
You realized that hour was the most important part, and I'm sure you lit up during that hour. It got you really excited and inspired, and you're like, that's the hour I want to expand to 24 hours of my day.
Think of this conversation for the audience that's listening to it, potentially could spark a thought, inspire an emotion to drive a behavior to better their lives. Think of that as part of your employment in a company. And think of you being the manager or the leader or the employer to be able to impart that to other humans. What your life would be like.
It's amazing.
And so I saw a big gap in business as a whole. I'll give you an example. The average Fortune 500 company trains their employees less than 10 hours a year. The half-life of the average Fortune 500 company has gone in the last 50 years from 77 years to 25 years, meaning they're just not lasting as long. We could go all day about how people are moving from job to job and not feeling significant in their jobs or feeling like they're a part of something and how important that is. Well, I saw what we did in our business to do that, to actually make people be inspired about what they were doing at their job. Right. I saw the impact that it had on the customer. I obviously felt the impact. It gave me meaning in my life, like significance and value to be able to impart that. And I spent the last couple of years codifying that or breaking that down to be able to teach executives that with the intent in the beginning to work with these Fortune 500 companies, and we're getting there now. So,
yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. And so something that I think is really interesting about what you're talking about, and something that I think is lacking in medicine, there is some of this in there, but I think we've lost some of our roots, meaning that when I go into training at my medical school or my residency program, and I've heard this from other programs, I don't think we really know why. Like, we all theoretically know I'm going in every day to help someone's life, help a patient. I'm going in to really care for them, but I don't see that explicitly stated. I don't see that necessarily imparted. So
do you feel like the vision is not clear?
Right. Or the vision, even if the vision is stated, let's say on the website or something, it's not modeled per se, or what's the word I'm looking for? We don't feel it in the culture. We don't feel it. There's a disconnect there. So I'm wondering, as I'm saying that, you hop into a business or a group of people that the team feels disconnected.
Yep.
What is your initial approach to kind of set that?
All of it always rises and falls on the influence of the leadership. They have to get extremely clear on what the vision is, the mission is, their values, because the values are the soul of the idea, the soul of the organization. It's what people aspire to live and embody. Mm-hmm. And they need to take ownership of that. And that's where the meetings come into place. That's where the training comes into place. Sure. That's where the symbolism, and there's a reason there are uniforms in companies. You have to bridge the gap between having a uniform and the uniform having meaning based on the vision, based on the symbolism. It has to be a part of the daily rituals, and you can have a constitution and no one read it. Yeah. You can have an American flag in every room, in every classroom in a country, and have no one stand up and salute it. Yeah. And that creates misalignment. Yeah. And alignment is the word. It's not so much even culture. It's cultural alignment, because you have your, we could say internal culture would be like your character. You have your character. You have your personal vision of your life, your personal character, your personal values. The business must have a big, great idea that all these people that have their own personal internal character come together and to agree that that idea is just a little bit more important than all of them. Or else what happens is it becomes a me organization. And like you told me while you started this interview process in the beginning with your podcast, you met a woman in your business, in medicine, that said she looked forward to 7 days off and not 7 days of helping people. Right. She was intrinsically selfish due to the lack of selflessness of the organization. The lack of purpose, the lack of vision, the lack of all that. Right. So it has to be part of the system is the easiest way to put it. Right. No, and I love that. And so one thing you commented on was the business or the group rises and falls with the leadership, right? So, I know we're going to have, actually every physician technically is a leader. We end up leading a team of nursing staff, medical students. We're leading our patients' lives and their health. Yeah. So how do we impart effective leadership strategies? What are some things, like in that first session when you're sitting down with a group? What are you talking about with that leader? Well, so let's be clear. Let's say that there's different levels of abstraction, or a physician, right? And that conversation is a micro example of a macro conversation with a hospital, per se. Sure. Let's say that I'm having a conversation with the board of a hospital. Sure. That hospital, you have to look at it as a country. And each section of that hospital would then be a state within that. Sure. And each state or section, there would be a hierarchy of leadership. Sure. And all of those are micro to macro versions of cultures that are created that must be over one helm. Right. Of an idea. Right. So it depends who I'm sitting with. But it's the same conversation. It's either macro or micro of the conversation. Yeah. So I'm sitting with, let's say just a physician. Well, that comes down to having a serious conversation of questioning to figure out what their vision to a solution of a problem is that would lead. So then that conversation mean what's their vision statement? Well, and then why is that? What's the purpose that drives that? And then the mission is the descriptive statement to get clear on what they're going to do every day to get that vision accomplished. And okay, now we got to figure out what their core values are and then what values they aspire to be. And those are their values. And through that, what I call finding it, we can transcribe it. When we write it down, we can now do it daily or actually break that down into the systems necessary to indoctrinate themselves and getting clear on themselves
Sure.
and inculcate their followers or their employees or their team on developing through their vision.
Right.
So like if they're not clear, and people how would you be clear? And you haven't really put yourself through that process of like who you are, why you're in the business that you're in, what you're actually aiming for, and who are you as a person. Like if you were gone tomorrow, would someone know what your values were? Probably not, because they're not written down. Yeah. So how can you operate? And then this is another thing. Every human on the planet is a leader. It's called biology. We have a preordained ability by the world to have children.
True.
So every human on the planet has a biological responsibility to be a leader at some point in their life.
Their family.
And everything that you're doing prior to having children, you're practicing your habituation to be a leader.
Right.
So all humans need to get clear on what their vision is, their mission, their values, and then they bring that into ecosystems. Whoever I'm sitting with, you're just a human. Yeah.
Hence the name of their group, which is Culture Matters.
It's all
and you know, Jay really said it right. You know, culture matters not just on the business or grand scale, but also on a micro scale. And not to get too deep right away. I mean, we could totally.
How do we not do that?
I mean, yeah, but to go totally, like, you know, from the psychiatric perspective, just for a second, you know, because I'm a budding training psychiatrist. In my training, think about the culture of the family you grew up in and how that's impacted you for the rest of your life. And you can literally say how much culture matters.
100 trillion%.
And how those roles and things that you took on as a child have maybe played out in many ways in your life or in my life or anyone's life. But to kind of pivot back to what we're talking about.
And by the way, that's why it's so important for, let's say, a physician that is in the medical field to get clear if they're going to run a team, for example. It's so important for them to have a clear vision transcribed that they can use to develop people, because every human that comes into that mix has had something occur in their life that may have taken them off track to their alignment. Mm-hmm. We're all looking for purpose. We just haven't figured out that we must create it. So you must create the purpose for your team.
I love it.
Like if you're a physician, get clear on that.
I love it.
Use that. And then the woman won't say, oh, I want 7 days off. They'll be like, I love what I'm doing because I see the meaning in what I'm doing.
Yeah. And so you said the first step was find it, right?
Yeah.
So finding it, like if I'm paraphrasing this correctly, is finding your inner purpose and values. And understanding that so much that now you can put it on paper and explain why those, like what those values are to other people.
Finding it is, so, and like even deeper is finding is having this conversation to spark the belief in being interested in understanding this conversation. To then be able to get clear on what my purpose is, what is my vision. Vision is like the visual representation of your goal. Well, your goals are going to be based on what you want and what you don't want. Right. Your purpose is why you're doing that, and your mission is like, this is what I got to do every day. So I'll give you an example. Culture matters as an idea. The vision is we want to live in a world where every man, woman, and child takes responsibility to share new ideas, to think, to develop. The mission is to read, to write, to speak, and inspire other people to do that. Mm-hmm. We got a list of values that when they're embodied, the individuals talk, think, believe, and habituate the behavior necessary to actually achieve that vision, to be more powerful, loving humans. So like my point is, you're in medicine, it's like, well, what, you write that down, like finding it is figuring out why you're even in the business. Like, and because that's your purpose will come from figuring that out. And like now it's clear and you can go to work saying everything that I'm doing or what I must do is going to bring me closer to that. Yeah. And those are the conversations you start having with the people on your team. And now you think, well, that sounds soft or fluffy. Yeah, alone it is. But when you tie that with the tacit knowledge people need to learn, like there's so much stuff you got to learn to be, I'm sure, to be a prominent physician in some capacity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of that can be stuff that's, lacks meaning. Yeah. If you don't give it meaning. Right. When you tie the meaning to the knowledge, I mean, that's some power there
100%.
To save lives. Like, what the heck are you doing?
100%. And so I want to use your team as an example here. So you like clearly stated your mission, you clearly stated your vision, and you said you have cultural values, and my assumption is every single person on your team knows those values.
Yeah.
And so every single person on that team can then embody or be a model of that mission, vision, and value system that leads you towards that vision, right? So not only are you sitting and working or doing whatever you're doing, but you can see the vision. So your direction, even though it's hard
Something
work.
that Simon didn't write in his book, Start With Why, which
Simon Sinek.
I can just give you is the answer. The vision is the why. The purpose is the why. The mission is what you're doing to get there. How you're actually going to get there are your values. Like your character is just like your reputation is the effect of the cause of your character. What's your character? It's what you say, what you think, what you hypothesize is possible, right? An idea, what you believe based on that hypothesis. Then you take action. The actions give you results, whether positive or negative, and based on your current belief, you either stop or keep going, which gets you habituations and that you now tell your friends, well, don't do that over there. That didn't work for me. And that becomes your conviction, and that's your character, which then translates to a culture. They either agree with you or don't agree with you. So my point is, everything in life rises and falls on that.
Yeah.
So you got to get extremely clear on that. So how we do it is we have meetings where we talk about these values and actually put them into practice with things that we need to learn.
Right.
And that develops, so the how are the values. Like how you're going to get there is embodying these character traits that will get the job done.
Right.
And so if you're a physician, I'm sure you could sit down and be like, who am I, or who do I need to be to be the best version of myself for my customer?
Right.
And we got to get clear on what words will symbolize that meaning, because that's all words are. They're bridges of thought energy.
Yeah.
It's like the word grit. Well, what does that mean? It means specifically different context, or like if I were to ask you what grit meant, you'd give me a sentence that might differ completely from Joe Schmo.
Right.
But Joe Schmo and you, and I asked 10 people, the average context of what it means might kind of sound the same.
Right.
However, unless everyone is on the same page in that culture of what grit means to them, there won't necessarily be a really high level of alignment.
Right. So what you're saying is, in the culture that you're developing, you need to be clear about what the word grit would mean, for example, in that team or in that group setting.
Heck yeah. Because that's going to create new, potentially habituations or habits that get the results that the founder of the organization, they're the catalyst, they're the father, the idea is the mother, they're the father. They are driving the behavior through the word, period. Yeah. And the son would be represented by all of the employees or all of the followers that are going to develop into leaders. Because all humans are leaders, biologically speaking, potential leaders.
Right.
It's like, it's very important. And we do that with team meetings. We have team meetings every Monday open to the public where people can come together and develop. Yeah. And in the beginning of those meetings, we start with a value. Yeah. And we use that to drive the conversation.
So,
and knowing it, this is important. Knowing it is the beginning, but being something is on a higher level of abstraction. It is when you talk about it, you think about it, you use it. It's like your homework, right? You're not just doing homework. You're using it in real life. Right. And it becomes a habituation.
So and I want to touch on that. So, for example, most students or doctors, one of the reasons they went through it is because they were inspired or saw someone who was a really fantastic example of someone who made them feel great when they're in the room, who helped someone, and that created an experience. And the reason I'm bringing this up is it's not enough on a cultural level for us to say that person's doing a great job. What we need to figure out, and what you're kind of saying, is that person is embodying a set of qualities, ideas, and actions that if we truly believe that this individual is a great model, we need to be able to transcribe it, meaning put what he's doing into words so everyone can get on the same page.
So it's interesting. Yeah. So that's quintessentially how ecosystems are developed, and where the hierarchy conversation comes into play, is that there are individuals that are extremely competent, therefore confident, and convicted through that confidence cycle, solve enough problems to create an ecosystem of shared belief around them, of yes men, to either work for them, with them, and inevitably help solve their problem. And what that inevitably becomes is an individual that is successful and other people whom resent that individual that are not as successful. And that's called the most businesses. And that if the individual that is extremely competent and confident at that skill set, usually not at other things, but at that skill set, develops this ecosystem of shared belief of people, because seeing is believing until believing is seeing, and people need to see that. That's why leaders lead from first.
Seeing is believing, and believing is seeing.
Seeing is believing until believing is seeing. Okay, and the visionary lies to himself. The liar lies to everyone else. Friedrich Nietzsche. The visionary is the competent influencer that is confident through the competence, that does it and does it and does it. What are they doing? They're solving problems. That's what a business is. It's a vision to a solution of a problem. They're solving someone's problem. Whatever business you want to create around that, cars, medicine, whatever the hell you want to tell. There's an individual that is completely convicted through their competency, that is making things happen, and other people are going to go fall around them. The first customer is the customer. The second customer is the employee. Yeah. And they're creating this ecosystem of shared belief through the hierarchy of them just being the best and other people wanting to model that behavior or wanting to get paid based on their skill sets, whatever that is. Yeah. What ends up happening is it creates a cognitive dissonance between the influencer and the people that are influenced by them, because it's like a bad parent, one that doesn't get to know you, one that doesn't show you the way so you can go the way, one that doesn't articulate their love for you or articulate how to pee without getting pee on the toilet seat. And so what I'm trying to say is, no matter what, there will always be a hierarchy, because that's how societies are formed, around picking the best price and the best product based on the best service. There'll always be a hierarchy of a competent individual who's confident and convicted and makes things happen. There'll always be that. Yeah. However, if that individual wants to develop into what a leader really embodies, which is someone that can develop other humans to be competent and confident, right? Not be a millionaire, but a billionaire. Solve a billion problems. They need to make lots of millionaires. How do you do that? They have to actually invest time in developing those people. And that can be very difficult for one main reason, even if they want to do it. They can't be everywhere at once. Right. So there must be an idea that's orchestrated that is about something more important than them, because it's not all about them. They're just the catalyst to the solution of whatever the problem is. There must be a greater vision. There must be a greater mission to aspire to. And their soul, which is their intrinsic character, their values, must be transcribed clearly in the context necessary to solve the problem, so that through the team meetings, through the team training, leaders or other individuals that are emanating at that frequency will attract to that idea and be developed on their skill set through their character to embody what that hierarchical winner was, which was the competent, confident person. And if none of that happens, no matter what, the ecosystem will always die. Yeah. Because that person will die. Yeah. And when the person is the driver of the ecosystem, of the business, of the hospital, of the doctor's office, whatever it is, when they die, the idea dies. A great example would be Alexander the Great. He never lost one single battle. He always led from the front. He had a very clear vision of a solution to the problem. He had 40,000 troops that followed him for 10 years. Eventually, they got sick and tired of fighting. We don't know if they killed him or not. I'm not going to argue conspiracy. But when he passed away, there was no cultural alignment between all the places that he conquered, and his empire dissipated. His wife was killed, son was killed, it's all gone. And then you look at his best friend, Ptolemy I, who really understood what I'm talking about. Whether he understood it at this level of abstraction or not, I don't know. I didn't live in that time. But he did go to Egypt and create 16 generations of Ptolemy. His last generation was Cleopatra. Why? There's many pieces that create a cult-like following, a cultural alignment. Mm-hmm. This is just some of them we're talking about. Like, he wrote books. He created the Alexandrian libraries. He was extremely clear on the use of the names that they would use for their children. Like, he went all in. Mm-hmm. And Ptolemy I created this lasting empire for a damn long time.
Sure.
Significantly more impressive than Alexander the Great. So that's just a case study, obviously, for what I'm talking about.
And to summarize what you said, you can have a confident, competent leader, and everyone here who...
Competent influencer.
Competent...
They're not a leader unless they do it.
Right, true. Influencer, right. Yeah. I can see what you're saying.
High performance.
Yes.
Don't excuse my French.
No. Like, for example, if you guys think about the typical, stereotypical surgeon who's extremely good at what they're doing... but they're not able to influence, like you were saying before, where they're able to teach and explain what they're doing, explain their process, talk about their values of how they got to that level of competency, then, as you were saying before, they're Alexander the Great, but they're not who was...
And they'll have a very low Pareto distribution of results.
Pareto, explain Pareto.
80-20 rule. 20% of the people are going to do 80% of the results, yada, yada, yada. If you want to increase that productivity and profitability, having the systems in place for cultural alignment to happen, like clear communication, like team meetings, like pedagogical syntax. That means how you actually communicate your truth so people get it, so they learn. If those things aren't in place, it's like playing Russian roulette. So you'll have high turnover. Right. And you'll have less profitability because people will be leaving because they're doing their own thing. There isn't something that they believe in.
Right.
And they don't know how to do it. Well, why do people usually not do their job? Not because they're being jerks.
Right.
They don't know what they're doing and they're afraid to ask or they're afraid to not. Like, they're just afraid.
Yeah.
They're afraid to pick up the phone and call somebody.
Yeah.
So that's really important to, like, get clear on.
Yeah.
It's like, you see it all the time. You see the high performance, like you brought up, neurosurgeon. Extremely competent.
Yeah.
And they'll be at the top of the hierarchy because they're willing to say no to a lot of stuff to be able to say yes to that.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean that they know how to lead. That's a whole nother cycle. That's a whole nother PhD.
But the thing is that we want our most competent and confident individuals to lead because that's how we're going to make the culture better. So that's why I think it's really important that we have this conversation because we need to figure out, and I love Jay being here because he's helped discuss and teach a method that not only are we being confident and competent, but what is the process of really distributing the culture that's going to allow people to learn, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're going to get a lot of,
something simple is you have to train your people.
Yeah.
Training never stops. It's part of... You earn your right of being a human on this planet. Like acting like one by being open and curious and not believing that everything that you've learned up to this point has got you this far will keep you going. No, everything you've learned has got you this far and will only take you that far. You've got to be open to learn. And as a business owner in the 21st century or as a leader in the 21st century, must create an environment of curiosity, openness, and the interest, the creativeness in your learning and growing, which as an effect of the causality of the industrial age, a lot of that meaning has been lost through schooling.
Yeah.
So we must bring that back in the information age. And actually, you must teach your people things. Like, they might be done with school after 12 years. That doesn't end, actually, until you're dead physically on the planet.
Yeah.
And that's part of what a leader actually adds value to their people, is always developing them. Part of being a leader is being a really, really, really authentic teacher. And if you aren't interested in that, then don't sign up for that class and hand your keys back in.
Yeah.
Period. There's no way around it.
So then I want to touch on kind of a next logical step is we have these leaders who are, let's say, confident and competent, but we want to get their teaching skills up. We want to have them to have the ability to be able to discuss their knowledge in a way. What are some methods you found for yourself that have allowed you to be a better teacher amongst your groups? What is something you do?
Well, I would say, number one, it's learning how to share. Learning how to speak in front of an audience is extremely important.
I love that.
Learning the power of story. Understanding, there is a massive difference between curriculum and pedagogy. Curriculum is what you're learning and pedagogy is how. And I give you an example. Textbooks are the watered down, hollow observations of seriously engaging thoughts of dead men. that professors put together in these books that no one reads. They're written as an antithesis to how humans actually learn. And you're going to get a ton of value by reading the non-fiction articulation of the professors actually writing their actual own books.
Yeah.
So take that and actually use your mind to abstract and say, well, this ain't working for anybody. This works to sell the damn books in a capitalist society. Someone must be learning something. Maybe we should actually teach the way humans learn. Like, how do we know anything about neuroscience at this point? How would you act on it? So as a leader, you need to be able to speak publicly because that's what humans have been gifted to do, unlike the cat walking around here. Number two, you have to genuinely be selfishly selfless. What I mean by that is when the student comes, the master, the teacher, has to be ready to get to know them, to listen to understand, to figure out their why is, and use that in the conversation to impart the information.
Right.
So telling stories is huge. Speaking publicly is huge. Giving a shit is huge. This conversation is actually really huge because it's the beginning of that journey. Potentially you say, this is interesting. I believe what this guy is saying potentially, or enough to maybe, I'm interested in being curious to have that thought. And I'm going to start learning more about human behavior because no matter where I go, and I'm going to either shut people out with how I communicate with them or bring them closer to me, no matter what my competency is, no matter what I do. I sell insurance, I sell houses, I save hearts or minds or whatever it is. So, understanding, this is my final answer on that. Whatever your discipline is, whatever your specialty is, humans didn't get this far specializing in something and ignoring everything else. We didn't. So study disciplines that are not your field, and you might actually have some new thoughts that you can bring into the equation.
Yeah,
it's like,
I love that.
You're a leader. You need to understand psychology. You understand sociology. You need to understand the brain and how the brain works. You have to understand leadership conversation. You have to understand sales. You have to and all of that takes time. So that brings me back to the beginning, what I said. As a human, you earn your right on this planet of habituating thinking, and to consistently think is like you're signing up for the gym. You're going to work out every day. You must consistently make a decision that you're going to be a philosopher in your own right, and you will develop into the person that you're always aiming for when you're trying to get the new job or the new promotion or the new thing out here. You're going to become that person as you learn and grow. So the only answer is you've got to be consistently learning and imparting that with other people. I would say that's the meaning of life.
Yeah. So there's a few things you said there. One, in order to impart knowledge, to be an effective teacher, you need to learn how to publicly speak because you have to take what's in your mind.
That's definitely
and then shoot it out. And why? Because when you speak, everyone's ears listen, then their ears translate that into an experience, and then they have thoughts, right? So speaking, you said, what was another point? Storytelling. Actually, I want to take some time on storytelling.
Let's do
it. Because there's a lot of people that'll just shoot out facts, or just give kind of raw data, which can work, and especially I'm going to talk about medical field, like it's all raw facts a lot of times.
Yeah.
But why?
Well, we can talk about that too. Yeah.
I mean, I want to ask you this question first.
Please do. Yeah.
Why is storytelling a really effective way of disseminating information?
Well, if you read any of the known literature on how the brain works, we watch movies not because they're hitting us with 17 million facts. They're using story, they're using character, they're using hope, they're using conflict, failure, mentorship, the success, and a lesson and transformation as a pedagogical syntax get us interested. Like that's a quick fundamental of like how to tell a story. Humans, our brains light up on scans on our limbic system, which is our story brain in essence. It's the bridge between where we were as not crocodiles, but instincts to where we are today as our logic and our reasoning.
Sure.
For whatever reason, the lowest level of abstraction I could use to explain why it's important to understand story is, well, our brain is the gateway between whatever the heck the mind is and whatever we put into reality. And we learn through story. We learn through metaphor. We learn through example and analogy and quotation. That's how humans learn fundamentally. Yeah. So that's extremely important. Yeah. And if you look at the definition of education is the like on Google, if you just look at our standard, definition of education, it's the process or art of interpreting knowledge, skill, and ideas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look at that definition. Knowledge, skill. Oh, I'm sorry. I messed up. Knowledge, skill, and judgment. That's the definition. Knowledge. To the best of our knowledge, the horse was the fastest way to get from point A to point C before we had what? A car.
Right.
So based on our knowledge of the horse, we didn't have the car. Skill is determined by what we know. Facts. This is the most we know right now.
Yeah.
And based on our skill, there's a hierarchy created, what? Through judgment, our social construct. The guy that's the best horse rider, he gets all the perks. Well, the point I'm trying to make is through story, the imagination is sparked. And through opening and asking questions, we create new things. Yeah. We create new things through our imagination, through our story.
Yeah.
And knowledge is subjective. It is only objective through the skill and the judgment of the current time. Because once that horse wasn't the fastest thing because there was a car, the guy that was the fastest rider of the horse, if he didn't have an imagination and didn't imagine, or someone didn't tell him of a story of what was possible with a vision of a solution to a problem, that there could be a car, he wouldn't actually take the time to get competent in driving the car. So just because he was the fastest horse rider doesn't mean he's the fastest NASCAR driver, and based on that, we're going to judge him as a society. So if you look at education, the answer lies within for a reason. Our imagination is what creates the matter. Our imagination is the energy, and the energy manifests into the matter because the energy or the thought becomes the word and the action and the result that rehabituates based on the judgment of the society. Period. End of statement. You can't argue that. Go away. So it's important.
So everyone listening right now, I want you to hear Jay for a second. This is one extremely intelligent guy, and you're not a doctor, but I would say you have the level of a doctor when it comes to a lot of the books you're reading. You guys don't know this, actually. Jay, how many books did you read this year?
72.
So Jay's read 72 books. So when he's dropping a lot of
that too.
Yeah, well, there's some. We're gonna have like lots of conversations with Jay. Jay has so much knowledge. You see as he's pulling out examples, like he was talking about Alexander the Great earlier, right? So, but what I want you to listen from this conversation, especially from my medical student listeners, physician listeners, people who are burnt out and are just looking for some new, fresh energy. Listen to the fact that he's saying it's not the story itself. And actually, I think I heard a video with you talking about too. It's the little bits where your mind goes off as you're listening to the story, where you're like, there's an idea that comes to you, that imagination, that creativity that came from you from that moment. That's something that's really special and important. It's that imagination.
Based on what we know about the brain, because we don't know enough about the mind to actually define it, by the way. But based on what we know about the brain and what happens when stories are told, it correlates to the cause of the effect, which is an idea. And ideas inevitably shape habituation, which create our objective reality. That's why knowledge is not finite. It's infinite.
Yeah.
So like when you bring up the book thing.
Yeah.
That's just an arbitrary expression of we don't know, because that's not what's important. It's that when you read, you're potentially, just like this conversation, no one needs to agree with anything. The point is to not. It's just to grapple with what you're hearing. So maybe you have a thought that through your worldview, based on everything that's ever happened, like two little neurons bouncing off together, we think of something like I can learn from you. Like we're learning together. Yeah. Because knowledge is subjective and we make it objective with the skill and the judgment.
Right.
So my point is, based on reading is just a conduit, like a workout of abstraction. It's like you read something. Well, you don't want to just agree with the author, because then, like Carl Jung said, ideas have people. People don't have ideas. Well, to have an idea, you have to read what is said and then think about it and have a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's what humans have been imparted based on biology. Like, we're lucky. We can do that.
Yeah.
Like, your cat can't. Keeps bumping into things over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it can't read
I actually haven't been paying
then,
attention to the cat.
And then have a... So, the point is, the reading part is just the work. I think Epictetus said this. This is not verbatim, but the book is the workout or the weight room of the mind.
Yeah.
but you're not memorizing the book. You're having a conversation with the author.
And I loved what you said there, because I think, and unfortunately I see this a lot with medical students, so I do want to make this comment. It's not okay to be agreeable for the sake of being agreeable. Like, just because you're listening to someone of authority, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with everything they said. What you're saying is that conversation is, do I actually agree with this? Yes, no. If not, why not? Or what am I getting out of this, right? Like, it's like the critical reading skills of going a little bit deeper into the content. And that's where you find the magic, right? It's that extra layer of what you were saying, the abstraction where your mind goes off and then is able to develop new meanings from that maybe even the author didn't get.
A great example right now would be in the medical field, based on everything that is known, I'm sure up to this point, taking action on a remedy for an ailment, if that's the best action that we know that solves that problem, then at that level of abstraction, that is the best damn thing we can do. But it doesn't mean that we stop asking questions for how it could be better, because that is what education actually embodies, is that the answer comes from within. Well, the answer comes from the thoughts, and the thoughts come from the asking of the questions and not letting ideas have us. And part of the ripple effect, because it's a cause or an effect that's from a cause, and that cause would be how information is and how people inculcate themselves in the collegiate studies to learn the tacit knowledge necessary to be the best doctor, for example, or the best whatever, is that ecosystem can create head down conscientiousness and not disagreement or abstraction. And when I say disagreement, it doesn't mean negative connotation. It can mean empowering of each other's truths. Like, if you just start all of a sudden disagreeing with everything I'm saying and being aggressive about it, that has nothing to do with me. But the power of me genuinely listening to you and shutting up and being present in your word, we can develop together. And that's the human condition stands on that.
Can we talk about that for a second? I think this is a really important conversation, is healthy disagreement. Meaning, I think this topic has been actually brought up before. I don't know if you read Ray Dalio's Principles. I think you thought it was really dry, right?
Ray and I.
It's just not going to work.
So much value in there. We'll talk about him later.
But he talks about, I forgot what his concept is
Idea meritocracy.
Idea meritocracy. And respectful disagreement or something along those lines. He basically has this culture where it's okay to be completely honest. Radical truthfulness.
Okay. Yes, I love that.
Radical truthfulness.
I love that.
Meaning that, like, if you feel like you're in disagreement, it's okay to have that argument. But I want us to touch on that. Why? Like, what is so powerful about that?
Well, let's look at a man and a woman and what happens from that disagreement. All beautiful things come from conflict. A meaningful relationship will come from the grappling of each other's truths based on two literal, almost different species. Like men from Venus, women from Mars. When they come together at a level of abstraction that love, which they can't explain, is just a little bit more important than either of their egos, they have a cherished relationship that grows psychologically, sociologically, and familially, that then now they can actually have sex and bear offspring. And life comes from that conflict, literally. So I'd argue that biologically we're inclined to agree to disagree and then agree on the level of abstraction that's a little bit more important, which we would call love. Life literally comes from two different subsects of a species called human coming together, never really understanding each other, and developing through each other. And that's what is so effing powerful about two halves of a whole. So now, doesn't necessarily have to be a man and a woman, I guess. But the point is, two halves of a whole. The power of two and the power of three and the power of numbers. No, I'm not a polygamist. That's not what I meant by that. No, the power of two, right? Two halves of a whole. Life is literally the effect of that cause. And then if you look at it in a relationship that probably won't last based on psychology, would be one where, and I'm talking spiritually last, not like they're married, someone's going to stay unhappily. Spiritually, ask yourself, would you want to be in a relationship where you felt worthless, meaningless, you had no opinion, and you were never listened to? Would you feel good every day? And the answer is no, then I'm right. at this level of abstraction.
Yeah.
To what we know about humans.
And life is relationships, whether it's, sexual or just on the friend level or in between countries. These arguments.
Life is literally the effect of energy and matter. The energy of the communication of two halves that make a whole, the man and the woman, and the matter would be the physical manifestation of that love, which would be a baby.
Well, as an example, with I mean, I'm going to have to think about that for a little bit, but sure.
And in your field, there is going to be a lot of facts and figures and material conversation, like do this, get this result.
Sure.
And that must be there to know that someone's life will be saved. So that could create a really difficult ecosystem of shared belief or misalignment with like, new ideas got us here. Like the man that said he died penniless. Everyone disagreed with him. I forgot his name. That's so sad. But he figured out that doctors were actually killing babies because they didn't wash their hands.
Yeah.
And because of this conversation not happening, the shared belief was that would never happen because we're in this to help people.
Actually, there's a big disagreement about the need to wash your hands, if anything. And then once people started actually implementing that on a kind of a cultural level within the hospital system, and they actually wash their hands, they noticed that infections decreased like a substantial amount. And that's why they implemented it, right? So even as you're listening to this, or as you're listening to all of our conversations on the podcast, or whatever content that you're listening to, it's so important, like to kind of tie back what we were talking about before, in these conversations, in these disagreements that are hopefully productive, there's an imagination piece that comes out, and then all of a sudden, a new idea that you have to be courageous enough to talk about comes out, and you're able to bring about a new change, the new hand washing for this age. Now, I personally think actually that the biggest quote change in our lifetimes is this
100%,
which is, and I want us to, I mean, this could be a whole hour of conversation, is, and I want to bring this to my listeners and followers, is because we're not having literacy or conversations around what the heck social media is, what podcasting is, what YouTube actually does for us. In your experience, how has that changed our climate of humanity? I mean, that's a huge question, by the way, but like in a little bit, like what are your thoughts on that?
This is argued, but 320s, 330s BC, 356, whatever, BC, Alexandrian Library is established. 500,000 plus volumes of books. We discovered the earth. For one of many things, it wasn't flat, let's just say.
Okay. Except there's a lot of flat earthists.
There are, and hey, let's have a conversation so we can grow together, right?
Yeah.
That, in its own right, was a micro example of what's going on now. Fast forward hundreds of years, Sciloon invented the paper. The East had more power than the West. Fast forward a couple hundred years, the Gutenberg Revolution. Johannes Gutenberg took the 4 pieces that it took to make that a process to make books and get them into people's homes, right, in the 1600s or whatever. This is a Gutenberg revolution. There are 7+ billion people on the planet that may not be able to read a book, but they can more likely be able to listen to a conversation, not to mention the fact that when Abraham Lincoln won presidency, the average level of vernacular or common tongue was at graduate level, and today it's at a 3rd grade level.
Whoa. Meaning
people have this turned off, but people having conversations, regardless of what level they are. I would argue that because of the information, because of audio, because of podcasts, because of conversations that aren't about just my ideas, but they're your ideas bounced off my ideas in an open, courageous conversation that we can grow together and literally have new thoughts on this podcast together, and millions of other people can do that.
Yeah. Because
of all that, I would argue that we could actually, as a unit, as a human race, raise the level of articulation. Like, so if we were to keep going, because we've been going from graduate level articulation a couple hundred years ago to 3rd grade level, the last presidency, they were operating at a 3rd grade level. I would say because of audio conversation, because of the consumer to consumer real conversations, not the system of one-sided conversation on the news media.
Sure.
That losing its power just as like an effect of the causality of the information age. Because of this, we are looking at an age that is bigger than the Gutenberg Revolution, bigger than the Alexandria libraries, bigger than Cylune and the invention of paper, bigger than anything we could have ever imagined. And this is the beauty of the human race, is that billions of people can start thinking again and raise the social evolution of consciousness on a level we've never seen. I'm extremely excited about audio and video.
Yeah, this is a crazy age to be alive. And, just as an example, you just flew over, you were in LA, right?
Yeah.
You just flew over to LA and you were working with a YouTuber who has, how big is his following?
2.9 million.
2.9 million. So let's
yeah,
for a second.
Some guy that's not even from America.
Some guy, okay.
He was an immigrant when he was 17. He came here with not a shirt on his back, basically.
Wow.
And in 10 years has so much value.
Right. So one person who was an immigrant came to the United States.
No family.
That's pretty crazy.
In America.
Yeah.
I'll introduce you guys.
Wow, that's nuts. So he comes here. He finds about this thing called YouTube. He learns about it. He works on it. I don't know his full story, but I'm sure he stayed consistent. He was working hard. He built his brand. He learned the skill set of social media.
Yep.
And 3 million people are listening to his voice, are communicating with him through this platform. When in humanity has it ever?
It could never have happened before. And the power that comes from the word in general and the thought and that cycle of speaking and thinking and abstraction and the power in our brains of our neurons having conversations and the neural nets that are formed to create the mind, and the fact that you're a mind and I'm a mind and we're like big micro examples of that macro example I just used, and 7 billion people that will turn to 9 billion and more in the future. Hell, if we're not on other planets doing other things, then I am just a crazy guy. Because that's the point, is that what I'm saying may sound crazy to many until they start listening to podcasts, and that there's so much genie in all of us. There's so much genius or imagination in all of us that someone from nowhere, a random place on the planet, could get on the internet and share their truth.
Yeah.
And we can all develop through that.
Yeah.
And just be a way better organism.
Yeah.
So that's my hope. I'm a very, very, very glass half full with this conversation. I believe that this is bigger than the Gutenberg press. This is the biggest, best time in history. And it's an exciting time. And it's a time to read, to mentor, and to find a mentee, and to develop, and to be curious, and to be open, and to be honest with yourself and other people.
Yeah.
And create meaning in your life. It's a great time for that. It's a great time.
I love that. And I think we're going to start to bring this conversation for a close for this part. I definitely want to talk to you more in the future. Some of the takeaways that, points that I want people to kind of remember from this conversation. Number one, I have to say culture matters. And I hope that you guys actually get a reason or a sense of why. Talking about culture, we spoke about how leadership is super important, and that the leader needs to be able to communicate their mission, vision, and also know their values very well, like literally transcribe it and be able to impart that knowledge to people. We talked about the importance of whatever content you're listening to that conversation you're having in your mind, and being able to have that imagination, that abstraction you were talking about.
Oh, it's called thinking.
It's called thinking. Let's talk about thinking. So being able to truly think, and actually I have to say, in medical culture, in some ways, being imaginative can be, it's actually something that unfortunately I feel like we're not allowed to always express, or people are very timid about. So when I speak about this to med students are going to feel this way. Don't be afraid to be you. Don't be afraid to have interesting ideas and conversations, because that'll actually enliven and enrich that culture that you're developing in your little team, in your hospital or system. And I want you guys to be able to do that. Is there any other takeaways or things that we kind of touched on you felt like?
Who's this guy talking about all this stuff? That's all I can think of. Like,
oh, yeah.
Who is this dude?
So
he has great hair.
I really do like your hair.
Thanks.
I also like your blazer to shirt.
I'm wearing velvet.
To pant combo.
Where I am.
Dude,
I got a cigar on here. Don't smoke. It's bad. This was a gift. Don't smoke. Right? That's bad culture.
So you actually walk around with the cigar to tell people to not smoke.
See? I'm a walking metaphor.
You're like, guys, this is what you don't do.
Yeah.
Waving it around.
Don't drink 80 ounces of coffee a day.
Do you drink that much coffee?
What's that going to do to my body if I were to do that over years?
Well, so coffee, for people who don't know, is a vasoconstrictor. Okay. It constricts blood vessels. And so one of the effects of that, maybe afterwards, you can have a rebound effect of vasodilation. I don't know if you get headaches or migraines.
I do, yeah. If you're not drinking enough coffee, you're not going to get the headaches.
That's one way to look at it. We're gonna have
we'll do that next time.
We're gonna have an off screen.
If you guys want us to talk about coffee culture, ask for that crazy guy with the great hair, and we'll be back.
So Jay Doran has been with us today from Culture Matters. What's a great way for people to reach out to?
Definitely, if you're interested in having thoughts that you could agree or disagree with, YouTube, there's about 1,000 videos on there like this. On Jay Doran YouTube, JayDoran. Send me a message on Facebook, same name, and LinkedIn. I do answer. I'm obsessed. This is the information age, so I am definitely obsessed. So I'll reach back out to you. So send me a message.
Amazing. Well, Jay, thank you so much for being here. I want to thank the Culture Matters team for being with us today. We had a lot of fancy equipment that we generally don't have.
Yeah, we got some audio.
We have some audio. We had some video. We actually did a little bit of Instagram Live. And guys, as I'm saying this too, like, again, information age, we're utilizing the tools of this age. And so if you guys have no idea about what I'm talking about, it's time to learn. And it's time to listen. And it's time to kind of take in this knowledge. Because these are the pens and papers of our time. And so I'm really excited to utilize these tools. I'm excited to be with Jay here today. And I had a really great time. Thank you for being on the Happy Doc.
Pleasure's all yours. I'm just got him. No, thank you.
And take care. Thank you so much for listening to the Happy Doc podcast, the voice of fulfilled physicians. If you enjoyed the episode, please drop us a like, comment, and share. Share us through the social media channels we have on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The handle is at Happy Doc Podcast. That's at Happy Doc Podcast. You can find our website at www.thehappydoc.com. Again, thank you so much for listening to the Happy Doc, the voice of fulfilled physicians.